And with that, life inside the coffee shop moved on, a reminder that even chaotic moments can lead to unexpected kindness. As the tow truck pulled away with Karen's car in tow, the parking lot buzzed with energy. People exchanged knowing looks and chuckles, some still recording the scene for good measure. The officer, calm and professional, shook his head slightly as he walked back to his cruiser, clearly having seen his fair share of public meltdowns. Karen, now without her car, stood frozen for a moment, her phone still in hand. She glanced around at the amused faces, then stormed off toward the nearest street corner, her indignation giving way to a quiet, simmering frustration. Meanwhile, the crowd slowly dispersed, the tension of the morning replaced by shared laughter and a sense of poetic justice. Conversations buzzed about how karma had made its appearance in such a spectacular fashion. For some, it was just another day. For others, it was a story they couldn't wait to share. The officer's face turned pale as he stared at the badge in Harper's hand. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, the tension seemed to ease, but Harper could see something else brewing behind his eyes: pride, panic, and a desperate attempt to salvage control. "Anyone can flash a badge," he muttered under his breath, taking a step back, but not fully retreating. Before Harper could respond, another police car pulled up, its lights flashing. A second officer stepped out, her demeanor calm but alert. She quickly assessed the scene, her eyes darting between Harper, the crowd, and her colleague. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone professional but wary. Harper could sense that this new arrival might complicate things further. The first officer spoke up, his voice shaky yet defiant. "She claims she's FBI, but she was acting suspiciously. I was just following procedure." His words were thinly veiled, a last-ditch effort to justify his actions. Harper didn't flinch. "Your procedure involved aggression and baseless accusations. I have nothing to hide, and the footage speaks for itself," she said, nodding toward the phone still recording. The second officer looked between them, her face unreadable. But then, instead of de-escalating, she reached for her radio, calling in backup. Harper's heart sank. This wasn't just about one officer's prejudice anymore. Something bigger was at play. The crowd stirred uneasily, the air heavy with anticipation. Harper knew she had to stay sharp. The stakes had just been raised, and the next move would change everything. As the second officer finished her radio call, the crowd grew larger, the murmurs now a steady buzz of concern. Harper remained steady, her badge still in her hand, though her mind raced through the possibilities. She could sense the situation teetering on the edge, but she also knew she wasn't alone. The phones, the witnesses, and most importantly, her own training were on her side. Before backup could arrive, a voice rang out from the crowd. "I know her." A man stepped forward, wearing a suit and holding up his own badge. He was another federal agent, someone Harper recognized from a previous case. "That's Special Agent Harper, and I'll vouch for her," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. The crowd shifted, their energy changing as the truth began to sink in. The first officer's confidence shattered. He stammered, trying to explain his actions, but the second officer silenced him with a sharp look. "We need to talk," she said coldly, pulling him aside. Harper watched as their conversation grew heated, but her focus shifted when she noticed her federal colleague approaching. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Harper nodded but didn't let her guard down. Just as the situation seemed to settle, the unexpected twist hit. The man who had stepped in as her ally leaned in and whispered, "This isn't over. There's something bigger going on here. You've made some enemies." Harper's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. The confrontation with the officer was resolved, but it was clear this was just the surface of a deeper threat. As she walked away, the crowd dispersing behind her, she knew the fight for justice wasn't over. It had only just begun. The barista chuckled softly, looking at the unexpected tip jar filled with small bills and coins. "Thank you," they said, their voice warm and full of gratitude. "You didn't have to do this, but it means a lot." One of the regulars shrugged playfully. "You earned it. Not everyone can keep their cool like that." The atmosphere in the shop shifted completely. What had been tense moments earlier now felt lighter, almost celebratory. People exchanged smiles, some even joking about Karen's dramatic exit. A customer near the window tapped the glass, pointing at Karen still pacing outside, her gestures animated as she ranted into her phone. The sight drew a few chuckles, but the barista shook their head with a knowing smile. "Let her be," they said, focusing on the next order. A quiet evening takes a shocking turn when an unexpected encounter exposes deep-rooted prejudice and power dynamics. In this story, a routine stop spirals into an alarming confrontation as a local cop, blinded by assumptions, targets a Black woman without realizing who she truly is. Little does he know, she's not just any citizen, she's an FBI agent. What follows is a powerful moment of resilience and justice as she stands her ground and reveals the truth. This story shines a light on the dangers of prejudice and the strength it takes to challenge it. It's a gripping tale of courage, accountability, and the importance of seeing beyond stereotypes. Stay tuned as we unravel the layers of this intense and eye-opening encounter. It all started when Agent Harper was driving home after a long day at work. Dressed in casual clothes and driving an ordinary car, she looked like any other person on the road. But for reasons she didn't understand, she noticed flashing lights in her rearview mirror. She pulled over calmly, knowing she hadn't done anything wrong. The officer, however, approached her car with an aggressive demeanor. His tone was sharp, his words laced with suspicion. Agent Harper stayed composed, handing over her license and registration without hesitation. But instead of routine questions, the officer began making baseless accusations. It became clear that this wasn't about a traffic violation, it was about something else entirely. Despite the officer's intimidating presence, Harper remained steady. She knew she had to tread carefully, but the question lingered in her mind. How far would he go before realizing the mistake he was making? As the officer's questions became increasingly confrontational, Agent Harper couldn't ignore the weight of his assumptions. His tone grew harsher with every response she gave, as if he were determined to find something wrong. Around them, the street was eerily quiet, the only sound coming from the faint hum of passing cars. Harper considered revealing her badge right away, but something in his demeanor made her hesitate. She wanted to see how far he would go with his unchecked bias. The officer, seemingly unsatisfied with her documents, demanded she step out of the car. Harper complied, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. Her training had taught her to handle high-pressure situations, but this one felt different. There was no reasoning here, only power and prejudice at play. As she stood outside her car, the officer's hostility escalated. He moved closer, his words sharper, his actions more threatening. Harper's mind raced, balancing the need for self-restraint against her instinct to assert her authority. What would it take to make him realize the consequences of his actions? The officer's grip tightened as he tried to assert control, but Harper's calm and measured voice cut through the chaos. "Step back." "Now," she said firmly, her words holding an authority that momentarily caught him off guard. But instead of retreating, he pressed harder, his frustration evident as he misread her composure for defiance. By now, the small crowd forming nearby was murmuring in disbelief. Phones were raised, capturing every detail of the escalating encounter. The officer, seemingly oblivious to the watchful eyes around him, barked orders, his tone dripping with condescension. Harper, still standing her ground, reached into her jacket, but not in the way he expected. In one swift motion, she pulled out her badge and held it up for him to see. "Special Agent Harper, FBI," she announced, her voice cutting through the officer's tirade like a blade. The look on his face froze, shock, confusion, and panic all at once. But the moment wasn't over yet. The damage had been done, and Harper knew this was only the beginning of the fallout.